I'm so curious to try them as the prices are great, but I'm turned off by the stories of lousy food, poor service and bizarre entertainment. What's it really like? Should I try them? This is what I hear most often about this very divisive line. So I decided to revisit them to find out the latest. So I booked myself on MSC Virtuosa for a week-long Norwegian fjords cruise. And this is what I discovered. First, let's talk about some upsides before tackling some of the, shall we say, thornier issues. Probably the best thing about MSC Cruises are their low fares. Even their premium cabins in their ship within a ship, the Yacht Club, are up to half what those similar suites would cost on other lines. For families, it's even better, as under 18s staying in the same cabin as their parents travel for free with just a few port and other taxes to pay. So for example, let me give you some numbers. On my particular cruise, cabins started from just $100. That's about £80 per person per night. So that's $1,400, £1,100 for a couple for a week. If they brought two kids with them, the cost would go up just $140 for the whole week. That's $10 per child per day. Amazing. Now, because of great pricing like that, I saw many multi-generational families and groups of friends, hen parties, birthday celebration groups, and also many solos because of the pricing, which I also was, by the way, on this trip. However, as I will come to later, although it's very affordable for all those groups, there are some key downsides and some big issues for each of those cruiser types. Next, because MSC is launching ships at a really ferocious pace, most of their fleet is new and very modern. Though they're probably a bit too glitzy and certainly too big for my taste, most people agree they're beautiful and they are definitely very well maintained, even if they're not really particularly distinctive, borrowing many of their features, I think, from other mega resort ship lines. So for example, the big Galleria Virtuosa on the class I was on is clearly heavily inspired by Royal Caribbean design. Their signature Swarovski crystal staircases are probably their only truly unique and different feature. MSC, by the way, have glitzy European-inspired decor versus the more kind of American feel of their US-based competitors. So that's Carnival, Royal Caribbean and Norwegian Cruise Line. Now, saying all of that, I felt MSC works absolutely best for cruisers looking for a bustling, family-friendly, high-energy resort vacation with parties at night for the parents and things for kids to do during the day. For adults, there was, for example, a boisterous party atmosphere at night with a focus on really busy bars and a nightly 10:30 p.m. massive themed party. The disco and the casino also ran into the early hours. Now, they matched it with some family-friendly options to keep kids busy and, frankly, out of their parents' hair, with large kids clubs for all ages and also open very late into the night, an amusement arcade, racing simulators, bowling rink, sports court, rope court. For daytime, there was that water park, the rope course, lifeguards at all of the swimming pools. However, these facilities are relatively modest and, in my view, don't match the scale or the sophistication of other resort lines like Royal Caribbean and Norwegian, who have go-kart courses, flow riders, ice rinks, laser tag, and so on. One thing MSC is doing better since my past trips is localizing. One thing putting many English-speaking cruises off MSC is that they do announcements, menu, signage, and so on in 6 languages: English, Italian, German, French, Spanish, and Portuguese, kind of reflecting and embracing their very diverse onboard mix and their European roots. But I found for my ex-UK sailing, it was almost entirely English language, with key announcements in only 2 other languages based on, I guess, those people who were actually on board at the time. The senior crew, including the captain and the cruise director, were from the UK for the UK sailing. All the guest entertainers were UK based, as was the trivia. Now, they skew things more US for those sailings out of there, but sailing in the Mediterranean remains a very multilingual experience. One great thing that they do is status match, and I think they're the only line that does it. So as I have the top tier, which is diamond status on Cunard, they matched that status and I became their highest loyalty level. And so I got all the perks that went with that, like priority boarding, special onboard events, complimentary specialty dining, a whole bunch of discounts, and so on. Another thing that they also have is the Yacht Club. This is a card-controlled ship-within-a-ship area where you can escape the busy and frankly hectic experience all around the ship. My cabin in here gave me access to the Yacht Club lounge and bar, restaurant, guest service and concierge desk, and a deck with plunge pool, hot tubs, bar, and a grill. It also does mean that there is very much a two-tiered experience, with Yacht Club guests having a quieter, more attentive, and frankly less frenetic experience, with various perks also to get around crowds and all the lines on board that I actually cover in more detail in a video that I've done about Yacht Club, so you can watch that for more. Though, as I also cover in that video, it doesn't quite deliver on all those promises. And that brings me to the other issues I have with MSC, because delivery misses like these are actually quite numerous. Everyone I spoke to on my cruise had some sort of complaint, but they always agreed or added the caveat that the price they paid was phenomenal. So that got me wondering if the confusion about MSC is more about unrealistic expectations or in fact underperformance by the line, as many people would argue. I felt one of the biggest impacts of their fares is they need to cram a lot of people onto the ship, making space per passenger feel pretty small. The ship felt ever so crowded in my view. I was on MSC Virtuosa. At double occupancy, it was built to hold just over 4,800 passengers, but it usually sails with 6,300. So that's 1,500 more passengers who are sharing cabins, and usually all of those are kids. I found the ship got really crowded with frequent lines and lots of noise. The only place to escape it was retreating into the Yacht Club. As there were so many families on board, finding kid-free zones was near impossible to do as well. There was only one adult-only space, which was the Sky Lounge, which also did actually get quite rowdy in the evenings. You know, there was no adult-only pool, although the small kind of plunge pool rear one did tend to be a little bit more adult. Now, although clearly some guests had expected it to be, the Yacht Club is also not a kid-free zone either. The large numbers of passengers all around the ship created several other challenges. First of all, dining. There were 3 set dining times of 5:30 p.m., 7:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. and there seemed to be very few chances to influence which one you were allocated to. There were 4 dining rooms and tables were packed in tight, and there were always lines every evening to kind of get in because there's so many people still being churned through. There were limited, very limited anytime dining options, which seemed to require guests to book a kind of a premium package, which included that plus a more private sun deck as well. The buffet was packed for every single meal. It was really hectic in there. There was also a space allocated for families to sit, but that wasn't really followed at all. There were not that many specialty dining options considering the size of the ship. Sushi, teppanyaki, steakhouse, Vietnamese, and Mexican. All, by the way, they were pretty good, and they sold out really fast. Now, annoyingly, even though I had pre-booked a package for 3 of those, I could only book them once I was on board, not before. And so getting the days and times I wanted was challenging, again, because there's just so many people chasing those. By the way, I thought the food across all of the venues was perfectly fine, especially for the fare and the volume of people that they need to feed at any one time. The menus offered, I thought, a decent choice, though it was probably a little bit light for vegetarians. The best I found and would have mostly was pasta and pizza, because there's Italian, it's what the heritage of the line is. Personally, I will not remember the cruise for the food, neither good nor bad. It was perfectly fine food. I think people are being a little bit harsh on it. Now, more about the impacts of the ship being so packed. It was hard to find somewhere to sit in the bars after dinner, especially if there was a group of us, for example. Also, the fitness center seemed rather small for the numbers and the kind of age profile of the cruises. I found it a similar size to those I found on much smaller mid-sized ships that have kind of an older, less active cruiser profile. That really did surprise me. Excursions also got sold out really quickly, but due to the numbers, getting off in port was hectic and places were really busy. For example, on my cruise in Oldham, the queue for the hop-on hop-off bus was hundreds of people all day long. as it was for the shuttle buses to the Lowen Skylift that I bought tickets for. So there was just kind of that busyness all the time. Back on the ship, I do think the numbers was affecting service too, which could be a little bit erratic and certainly slow in the bars and the restaurants. And guest services were kind of much more offhand because they needed to churn through the fairly longish lines that were often waiting there. I also felt that the focus was on a more transactional rather than kind of a relationship building approach and kind of culture. So getting things done as fast as possible. Now, being a European line, it didn't aim, I felt, to be as chatty, as friendly, as smiling and outgoing culture of service that I certainly see and experience on more US-based lines. And I think that's perhaps why many North Americans find the service actually a bit off. I actually didn't find it that different to, say, the UK lines like P&O Cruises. It's a different kind of philosophy of service. I found I also experienced a few areas where the attractive fares meant money was not going into some key aspects of the cruise. First of those was entertainment. The shows themselves are, in my view, poor versus the other mega ship resort style competition of Carnival, Royal Caribbean and Norwegian Cruise Line. Now, while those have more big production shows or full-on Broadway shows, MSC shows are much less impressive. They're smaller scale kind of song and dance review shows that you're going to find on more older fashioned classic lines. They launched, for example, an ABBA show while I was on board, and it was pretty basic. It was much more akin to kind of an ABBA deck party that I come across on so many lines, but it did have kind of better costumes and more dancers. They did have an opera and ballet show that went down pretty well, and that was a little bit more unusual. Even the added charge shows in the Carousel Lounge by their Cirque du Soleil style troupe was entertaining, but it did feel a kind of a paler, less kind of costly imitation. The other thing that struck me, especially versus those kind of direct competitors, is the daily program was also surprisingly old-fashioned and very classic for a contemporary and more family-focused line. It featured basic trivia, dance classes, karaoke, bingo, crafts, table tennis, other game competitions, a bit of live music during the bars, and those big nightly parties. There were no kind of enrichment talks or anything diving into the region in the program at all. I felt things were not done with scale and ambition. So it was basic trivia versus kind of big branded game shows you get on other lines. No big ice skating water shows like on those other lines. And even the very hyped crew parade, unlike other lines, it was just a small 30 or so people, mostly an entertainment team, sort of doing a little march through the Galleria. Now, the other thing that I had expected and did see was the push to get us to spend a lot of money on the ship. There was a lot of promotion to get us all to buy packages for drinks, especially dining, Wi-Fi. Now, I felt the packages had many more restrictions than on their competition. For example, the specialty dining package I mentioned meant I only had a limited choice menu in each of the venues. And the Wi-Fi package was strictly for one device. Unlike other lines where you can log out and log in on another device, I had to buy a separate package per device. There was, of course, a big focus on shopping with shopping displays and deals out in the Galleria whenever they had a chance to. Lots of space was taken up by a big chocolate shop, a gelato shop, a crepe shop, all of course which were extra costs. I was also taken by how pushy they were at getting us to pose and buy photos. The photographers were set up kind of everywhere you turned and would constantly pitch you when you walked by to get you to come and pose for photographs. Then, of course, there were some of the activities like that amusement arcade I mentioned. They all had charges too. Saying all that, I don't feel that MSC pushed any harder than their close competition, Carnival, Norwegian, Royal Caribbean, on what people call nickel and diming. The other thing I think that is less good, for me anyway, is as MSC has these big ships, and while they're expanding into more regions, they are very limited where they can go because of the size, and they therefore have to stick to fairly well-trodden itineraries with ports that can cope with the numbers. So even going to the Norwegian fjords, we had to go to places which could cope with almost 6,000 people getting off, and so it was much more limited versus when I've been there on smaller ship lines. I prefer a more adult-only cruise, but I knew going in that MSC would be more packed with families. But I did see people dismayed with families and kids taking over the pools, talking and crying during the shows, being in the bars, and even the disco at night. But it was something that I expected. During school vacation, there will be on MSC Virtuosa and many of their other ships about 1,500 kids, way less out of the holidays. So this is not, in my view, a line to use if you don't want loads of kids and loads of families around taking a lot of the activities in the focus. I must admit it was that, along with the size of the ship, the crowds, the bustle and the noise, that meant I was actually quite relieved when the week came to an end. It's not for me. But if you're looking for a great value family cruise, resort style vacation, or you're an adult looking for a good party atmosphere that won't break the bank with food, service and entertainment reflecting that kind of value price, then I think MSC is worth considering. But I do feel also that people who are the harshest about MSC seem to be comparing it to the wrong lines. When I was on board, and since many people have asked me if it's an alternative to Celebrity, Princess and even more premium lines, no, it is absolutely not, but nor is it trying to be. But what about Yacht Club? Is that comparable to those more premium lines? To find out, watch this video where I start dismantling the biggest conceptions about the Yacht Club. See you over there.